Here we're going to look at factoring trinomials by the AC method. You might have a way of factoring that you feel comfortable with, and there are a lot of different ways of factoring out there. This is just one way that works, and it's for factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's take a look at 6x squared plus 19x minus 7. In the AC method, we're going to identify the a, b, and c numbers. Here a would be 6, b would be 19, and c would be negative 7. With the AC method, we start by multiplying a times c. So a times c would be 6 times negative 7, or negative 42. Then what we do is find two numbers which multiply to the a times c number and add together to the number for b. So in other words, we want in this case to find two numbers which multiply to be negative 42 and which add to 19. So if it's not obvious what numbers multiply to be 42 that work here, we can go one by one through each number that multiplies to be 42. So for instance, 1 times 42, 2 will also work. 2 times 21 is 42. 3 times 14 is 42. 5 doesn't multiply, neither does 4, 5, but 6 does, 6 and 7. And those would be all the numbers which multiply to be 42. But they need to multiply to be, in this case, a negative 42, and they need to add together to a positive 19. So what that means is that one of the numbers has to be negative, and the other one has to be positive. So the smaller one can be negative, the larger one will be positive. And we can see how a negative 2 and a positive 21 add up to be positive 19. Now what I'm going to do with those two numbers here is I'm going to take the middle term in the trinomial and split it up into two terms using those numbers. So here we'll put 6x squared minus 2x minus 20 or plus 21x minus 7. And now this is what we want to factor from here. We do it by something called factor by grouping. I draw a line down the middle, and I look for what I can factor from the first two terms and from the second two terms. In the 6x squared and minus 2x, the greatest common factor between those is a 2x. So I factor out a 2x, and then inside the parentheses will be 3x, because 3 and 2 is this multiply to be the 6. And then we had a negative 2x here, so what will be left over is a negative 1 in its place. And then for the 21x and the negative 7, the greatest common factor is 7. So we'll put a 7 out there, and inside the parentheses would be 3x minus 1. Since again, multiplying the 7 to the 3, we get the 21. Multiply the 7 times the 1, goes back to the 7 up above. Now, as long as everything in the parentheses are identical, we're almost done. So the 3x minus 1 goes together into its own single set of parentheses, and next to it, we'll put the 2x plus 7 in parentheses. And that'll be how this one would factor. Here's another example. X squared minus x minus 6. Like last time, I'll start out by identifying what the numbers are for a, b, and c. In this case, a is 1, b is minus 1, and c is minus 6. So like we did last time, we start off with a times c. So that'd be 1 times 6, negative 6 I should say. which would equal to negative 6. Now I want to find two numbers which multiply to be negative 6 and which add to be the number for b, which is negative 1. So there's really not a lot of possibilities to multiply to be 6, just 1 and 6 and 2 times 3. And we can see how they must multiply to be a negative and also add to be a negative. In this case, a positive 2 and a negative 3 would do the trick. Those would add together to get a negative 1. So I'll take what I'm factoring, and in the middle I'm going to put two terms for 2x minus 3x minus 6. And then I'm going to factor by grouping. For the first two terms, the x squared and the 2x, the only thing they have in common for a greatest common factor is just x. So I'm going to factor out an x and write in parentheses x plus 2. One thing that's good to always do here is whatever sign is in the middle, go ahead and bring that sign down. So if I have a negative here, it's going to stay there in the middle where it was from up above. And then I'll look at these two terms and figure out what's the greatest common factor of 3x and negative 6. That would be a 3. So I'll put a 3 there. In parentheses, I'll put an x. And then I have to think about what number do I put here after factoring it away from negative 6. I'll have to put a positive 2. That's because I have a negative 3 in front. The negative 3 times the positive 2 is how the negative 6 is up there above. So that has to match up with the negative 6. So that changes into a positive. Now I'll put the x plus 2 here, since it's the same in both parentheses. And then next to it, in parentheses, I'll put x minus 3. So here's another one that goes 6x squared minus 17x plus 12. I'm going to pause here for a moment, and if you want to pause the video and try starting this one on your own, try to go through the steps for AC method or any way you'd like to factor, and in a second I'll go ahead and work it through. Like last time, I'm going to find A, which is 6, B is negative 17, and C is 12. We'll multiply A times C, and that would be equal to 72. So we want to find two numbers which multiply to be 72 and add to negative 17. Now 72 can be broken down with a lot of different ways of multiplying it. I'll go ahead and list them all out here. 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and 24, 4 times 18, 5 does not work, but 6 does work, 6 and 12, 6 times 12. 7 doesn't work, but 8 does, 8 times 9. And these multiply to be a positive 72, but they also need to add to a negative 17. So how we can do that is by making them both negative. If they're both negative, then they multiply to be a positive, but then they'll add up to also to be a negative. So which of these will add up to be negative 17? We see that negative 8 and negative 9 would go together to a negative 17 and multiply to be a positive 72. So I'm going to factor out this by putting in the middle the negative 8x, the minus 9x, and a plus 12. And we'll factor by grouping. The GCF of the first two terms is 2x. And if I factor out a 2x, it'll leave in parentheses 3x minus 4. And then I'll go ahead and bring down the negative in the middle. Just keep it there in the middle. From 9 and 12, the common factor is 3. So I'll put a 3, and then in parentheses, we'll put 3x. And since I put a negative 3 in front, I have to put a negative 4 in the parentheses, because the negative 3 times the negative 4 agrees with the positive 12 up above. So in parentheses, I'll put 3x minus 4 times 2x minus 3, and that'll be how this one factors.